Welcome to Lesson 3 of Apache Mastery, the one where httpd.conf stops looking like a wall of text and starts looking like a map. Here's the truth. It's about 250 lines, but most are comments. The real config is just 4 pieces. Defaults includes the access file name and directory blocks wrapped in a scope hierarchy of 5 nested rings. Read it once, line by line, and every edit you make from here on lands exactly where it should. So here's the map for today, in 4 pieces. 1. Apache2.conf is the single entry point. Apache reads it top to bottom, every start. 2. Include directives stitch in everything else, in a strict order, merged into one in-memory tree. 3. 5 scope levels, each one nested inside the last. Server, vhost, directory, location, htaccess. And 4. When scopes collide, the most specific one wins. Get those 4 and you know where every edit belongs. Now let's zoom in on those scope levels. 5 rings like Russian dolls. The outermost is server, settings in apache2.conf that affect everything. Who Apache runs as, what ports it listens on. Step inward and you hit virtual host, scope to one site. Then directory tied to a file system path, then location tied to a URL pattern, and finally, htaccess, one folder evaluated at runtime. Inner always overrides outer, so when a directive seems ignored, walk inward from the server until you find the ring that's quietly winning. So let's open the file itself. Strip the comments away, and apache2.conf is about 50 lines, and they fall into 3 clean blocks. Globals at the top, who the process runs as, the PID file, timeouts. Then a safety block that denies the entire file system by default, which is why a fresh Apache serves nothing until you explicitly allow a directory. And finally, the includes, which pull in your modules, your ports, and your vhosts from separate folders. That's the whole entry point. Read it once, and every Debian or Ubuntu Apache server suddenly looks familiar. Now, those includes pull in dozens of files, and the order matters. Apache reads them top to bottom, alphabetically inside each folder, and the last write wins. Modules load first, then ports, then conf-enabled, and finally sites-enabled, which is exactly why your vhost can override anything a module set. When you need proof, Apache 2ctl ddump includes shows the exact sequence, and dump run cfg tells you the effective value after every merge. No guessing. Just trace it. So with order settled, let's talk conflicts. 3 classic ones where 2 scope levels fight over the same directive. First, server-wide allow override none, but a directory block flips it to all. The inner block wins, but only for that path. Second, 2 directory blocks both match a request, the longest path wins, so var www uploads gets its own options. Third, the sneaky one. Directory and location both apply, but location runs later in the request lifecycle, so it overrides. Specificity has rules. Learn these 3, and most scope surprises disappear. Now let's watch one directive, allow override, travel through every ring in a real config. At the server level, it's locked down to none. No htaccess anywhere, ever. The shop.com vhost inherits that lock until a directory block on var www shop flips it to all, unlocking just that path. And down in admin, and .htaccess file finally uses that unlocked permission to require a valid user. 5 rings, 1 directive, 1 clean result. That's the scope hierarchy, operational. So why all this nesting in the first place? Apache could have been one giant file. Instead, it gives you 5 scopes and include trees, and that's a deliberate choice solving 3 real problems. First, different parts of your config change at completely different rates. Kernel-level stuff yearly, htaccess maybe daily, and separate files mean separate review cycles. Second, small scope means small blast radius. Break a vhost, you break one site, not the whole server. And third, Scope is how a sysadmin delegates rewrite rules to an app team without ever handing over root. And once you understand the scopes, these are the 7 commands that let you interrogate them. 2 5-star ones to memorize first. Apache 2ctl, S, which lays out every virtual host with its port and server name, and Apache 2ctl td dump run, CFG, which shows the effective merged config after every include and override has been resolved. When a directive isn't behaving the way you expect, stop guessing, dump the runtime config and read what Apache actually sees. Print this slide, tape it next to your monitor. Knowing the commands isn't the same as owning the file, so here are 3 drills to take you from reading to predicting. First, open httpd.conf and walk every non-comment line, classifying each as global, include, or directory block. You'll see how little is actually there. Second, trace where listen80 really comes from and predict the file before you grep. Third, the payoff. Create a scope conflict with allow override. Predict whether .htaccess fires in each folder, then verify with curl. Read, trace, predict. That's the whole skill. Once you can predict, you'll start recognizing the classic traps. 5 of them, and every Apache veteran has hit all 5. The pattern is always the same. A directive doesn't work, and the real answer is wrong scope, or another scope overriding. Your htaccess silently ignored because allow override is none upstream. Vhost config dumped into Apache 2.conf, blasting global. 2 directory blocks for the same path, last one wins. Location used for file system rules when it's actually URL-based. And the cruelest one? Your edit worked, then a later include quietly undid it. When in doubt, dump the running config. That's ground truth. And that's lesson 3. You've decoded Apache 2.conf, traced every include, internalized the 5 scope rings, and you know how merges resolve. The file isn't a mystery anymore, it's a map. Next up, virtual host. We'll take this foundation and ship 2 real sites on the same VM, name-based and IP-based, with server name, server alias, and document root doing the work. See you in lesson 4.